But I want to go back for a moment to how it all began for me, before we turn to questions and things. And when I was a tiny little girl growing up in England, I always loved animals. And I had a very wonderful and understanding mother. So when I was 1.5 years old, she came into my room one day, and I'd taken a whole handful of wriggly earthworms into my bed. And lots of mothers would get mad and say, throw those dirty things out. She said very quietly, Jane, if you leave them here, they'll die. They need the earth. So we collected them up and took them back into the garden. And then when I was 5 years old, we lived in a city in London. And when I was 5 years old, we got to stay on a farm in the country for a holiday. And I can remember it because cows, pigs, horses, seeing them for the first time from London, we just saw pigeons and dogs and cats. And I was given a job to help collect the eggs laid by the hens. And the hens mostly lay their eggs in these little wooden nest boxes, probably hen houses about this high, a bit higher, where they also slept at night. In the daytime, they could roam around in the farmyard. There were no cruel battery farms in those days. And so I was collecting the eggs from the egg boxes, nest boxes, putting them in my little basket, but you know, an egg sort of that size, right? And so I was apparently asking everybody, where is the hole on the hen big enough for the egg to come out? And obviously nobody told me to my satisfaction, so I hid in the hen house. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and eventually a hen came in, and I saw her laying an egg. Well, by this time my family was frantic, they didn't know where I was. And my mother's out there, and it's getting dark. And she sees this excited little girl rushing towards the house all covered in straw. And instead of getting mad at me, how dare you go up without telling us, don't you ever dare do that again. She saw my shining eyes and sat down to hear the wonderful story of how a hen lays an egg. And she supported my love of animals. She found books for me to read. Dr. Dolittle, I don't know if you have Dr. Dolittle in your school library, but if you haven't, I'm going to jolly well send you the story of Dr. Dolittle. That's what set me on my path. But then you surely all know Tarzan. You probably know Tarzan from the movies. When I was your age, there was no TV. It didn't exist. It hadn't been invented. So I read the book, and I read all the Tarzan books. And that's when I had a dream. I'm going to go to Africa, live with animals and write books about them. Oh, everybody laughed at me. How would I get to Africa? It was still thought of as the dark continent. And at this time, when I was 11 years old, World War II was raging across Africa, across Europe. My father was off fighting. My mother and my sister and I had gone to live with my grandmother. We had very little money. We always had enough to eat, but we got second-hand clothes. We couldn't afford a bicycle. And so no wonder people were laughing at me and say, Jane, you'll never get to Africa. We still called it the dark continent. And most important of all, I was just a girl. And back then, girls didn't get to do that sort of adventurous thing. That was for the boys. But my mother never laughed at me. She always said, if you really want something, you really work hard, and you take advantage of opportunity, and you never give up, then you find a way. So I did. Couldn't go to university, there wasn't enough money. I went later, but not to start with. And I earned the money to get to Africa after I was invited by a school friend by working as a waitress. I served people's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And finally, it took a long time, I had enough money for my return fare by boat, which was cheapest then. There were no planes going back and forth. And so I was 23 when I went on this amazing adventure and waved goodbye to my family, my friends, and my country. And look where it's led me now, into this wonderful, magical world of the wild chimpanzees. And why did I leave? Why am I no longer in those forests? We have our project there. I'm not there except twice a year, maybe for 4 days at a time. I'm traveling the world 300 days every year, talking to groups of people with this kind of message. And when I was first going around talking about the fact that chimpanzee numbers were decreasing so fast as forests went and chimpanzees were hunted for food and to get their babies for entertainment or medical research. And their forests were disappearing and human populations were growing. So these are the things I was talking about.